Charlie Amáyá Scott, a Diné scholar, writer, and creator, is dedicated to inspiring joy and justice. She reflects and celebrates what it means to be Diné, queer, and trans in the 21st century, sharing her brilliance and humor with thousands online as Diné Aesthetics. When we met with Charlie, a summer storm rolled through, thunder shaking the walls as we laughed and talked all afternoon. In this episode, she speaks about leaving academia, living in community, and the daily practice of choosing and loving herself. For Charlie, love is abundance, found in quiet mornings, soft laughter, and the courage to be fully who you are. Chwant Eskenahe.
Bonjour. Welcome to Tending Our Roots with Indigenous Methodologies, where we explore Indigenous approaches to research, evaluation, and community practice.
Our conversations center how Indigenous knowledges and ways of being address the structural limits of Western frameworks. This podcast is a living resource for those nurturing the health, healing, and futures of Indigenous communities.
I'm Mikas Gonzalez.
And I'm Jill Fish. Hi, Charlie. Thank you for being here today. It is so nice to have you. We're so excited.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Fish.
Yes. Well, let's just jump right into it. You've written about the sacredness of trans joy, and in your piece, I'm proud to be my mother's daughter, you share that joy is part of your healing and resistance. What has surprised you most about your journey towards celebrating your own trans joy? What does that joy teach you?
What has probably surprised me the most about celebrating my own joy, especially as an Indigenous trans femme, is how hard it is. I don't think people, particularly people who are not trans, they don't particularly understand how exhausting it is to be trans right now, given our political circumstances and the hatred that we are experiencing both on social media, but also in person. But also, I think something that has been surprising has also been how necessary it is to really embody joy, especially as a means of both survival and freedom dreaming. And what that joy has taught me is that even in spite of this violence we experience from this colonizing world, so many of us are daring to be happy. So many of us are daring to live and be who we are. And there's a lot of strength in that because our joy is rooted in resistance, in defiance, but also in choosing and loving ourselves in all of our entirety. And although there's a lot of great things about the joy, like I said earlier, it is so hard to be happy when the world tells you every single day that you do not belong.
I love the word daring because it sounds so intentional that you and other trans Indigenous people are daring to live authentically despite the colonizing conditions. And how powerful your narrative and Indigenous trans representation is to youth who also dream to dare.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for making that connection. I do as well.
And I loved, and I think we both did, that term of like freedom dreaming as well. And what can you explain more about what that means to you?
I feel so bad bringing that into the conversation because I'm always good at citing and I cannot remember who conceptualized freedom dreaming. I know it is a Black scholar and I know it has its root in Black studies. But from what I can remember, freedom dreaming is all about imagining possibilities of liberation. And in this imagination, that's what it is. We're daring to dream. We're daring to dream of freedom. And those dreams, that imagination motivates us because we see a possibility. And in seeing this possibility, we work towards it. And so that's what I particularly love about the concept of freedom dreaming and how connected it is to, I think, both not just the Black struggle, but I also think the struggles that all marginalized people have against settler colonialism. Because every single day we dare to dream of a world that's better than what we currently have, and that moves us and motivates us to nurture something better, to change the way our lives are and also our perspectives, and to really work towards it.
Yeah. I feel a sense of like purpose
Mm-hmm.
and maybe a sense of alliance with others, sort of
Yes.
wanting that same dream, right?
Yeah.
So you've shared that you were never invited to participate in Canalda, the Navajo rite of passage for young women.
Mm-hmm.
In that quote, womanhood is a gift that my community has not given me and probably never will. What are your thoughts on how coming of age or puberty ceremonies could be reimagined to include trans and two-spirit youth, or even adults later in life? What might it mean to reclaim those rights in ways that honor both identity and tradition?
And honestly, I don't think our coming of age ceremonies need to be reimagined. And the reason why I say that, and this is sort of like my perspective, um, something that I have learned and cherished is that our traditions and knowledge are meant to grow and change because as humans, we grow and we change. That's what we're meant to do. However, the essence of who we are remains consistent and is intergenerational. So who you are as a Diné, who you are as a Hopi, who you are as a Lakota, or Dakota, or Cherokee, or Ojibwe, who you are is something that's passed down. And I think that's what we need to remember when it comes to these puberty ceremonies, because we are sharing knowledge of what it means to be in community. And so it's not necessarily that we need to reimagine these ceremonies, but we need to shift our attitudes and perspectives around them, because the tools and practices are there, but it's the way that but it's our relationship to these tools and practices that needs to shift and change. And by changing our relationship to how we understand knowledge and tradition needs to also include our relationship to our two-spirit and trans relatives. So that's what I think needs to change, is our attitudes and assumptions that we make about our two-spirit and Indigenous trans relatives. Because at the end of the day, or even at the start of the day, many of them are disrupting and challenging settler colonialism in ways that cis natives will never be able to do, because they've never had to question their identity. It's always been a given. Whereas like for us, we constantly have to fight for who we are every single day. And by having the opportunity to participate in these ceremonies as they already are, it only just furthers our beauty and our complexity and our brilliance as two-spirit and trans folks. And so what we need to do is give our two-spirit and trans relatives the opportunity and resources to access and experience these coming-of-age ceremonies and puberty ceremonies that honors their identity and their experience.
Do you see that happening anytime soon?
I do. I do see that happening, because something that I'm so proud of is that, as you know, earlier, I wrote a whole journal article about how I'm proud to be my mother's daughter. And what has come from that is that my relationship with my mother has grown and changed over the years. I'm actually creating a video with PFLAG about this. And in this video, I talk about my relationship with my mother. So like when I was 13, that's when I told my mother I was queer. And she told me that she loves me. However, when I was 23, I told my mother that my English pronouns are they, them, and we didn't talk for a month. But when I was 28, I overheard her telling a complete stranger that she has 2 daughters and her oldest one just finished her PhD. And that was the first time I've ever heard my mother refer to me as her daughter. And something that I've also noticed as our relationship has grown, so has also her bravery. She is a lot more bold now when it comes to protecting and advocating for Two-Spirit and trans youth, especially in our little community. And she's a third grade teacher at the local public school district. And so she's teaching third graders about pronouns and gender identity. And she even corrects my relatives or people that she knows when they misgender me. And so she's doing the work of holding people around us accountable and being the brave one out of the both of us. And she's with someone, her partner is a traditional Navajo medicine man. And so it's so beautiful to see how like they're doing the work of cultural inclusivity, because they're sharing both knowledge and they're also asking me. So in a way, we're all sort of working together to make the community inclusive in our own little way, using the experiences and resources and knowledge that we each have. Her being a teacher, her partner being a traditional Navajo medicine man, and myself being a scholar who knows a little bit too much about theory.
I love your response because it's so thoughtful and you challenge what we asked, which is, does it need to be reimagined? Do puberty ceremonies need to be reimagined? And I think reimagining implies something ambiguous, tearing something down and building it back up to be different. And what you're saying is, no, we don't need to reimagine things. These ceremonies tell us who we are as Diné. But there are very practical things that need to be changed, like a growing relationship with trans and Two-Spirit Diné youth to have these ceremonies be inclusive. And these are very direct and clear initiatives that the community can respond to, right? Correcting mispronouns, misgenders, when someone misgenders you or anyone else. But these are very clear directives or initiatives that people can respond to in real time, right? Take the time to learn someone's pronouns, speak up when someone is being misgendered, and be able to say how to move forward in a good way that it is inclusive and culturally responsive. And I love that because these can be solutions that are attainable.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm seeing it in real life with my mother and her partner.
Absolutely. Yes. And like, how beautiful is that, right? That you have your mother who's teaching third grade and can affect the lives of young people in real time.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I also love that response too. So I'm doing some work in our own community, in Ojibwe community, around puberty ceremonies. Not just what we do, but why we do it. We ask the question to these elders and these ceremonial practitioners about our young people who are non-binary or, don't, may not go through a woman's ceremony versus a man's ceremony, what happens. And their response across the board was that only the spirits decide that, right? That it's not for us as human beings facilitating the ceremony to decide what that is for somebody, but it's the spirits that see the spirit of that person. And so it's almost like a removal of if that's not you and your identity, you don't get to decide, right? That decision is with those spirits, those money dug, and that person who has a spirit going through that ceremony.
Let's switch gears a little bit. Your work, Charlie, especially through social media, has become a vital site of Indigenous storytelling. We're curious, how do you see platforms like Instagram or TikTok shaping Indigenous knowledge sharing today? How do we balance online accessibility with responsibility, especially when it comes to protecting sacred or community-held knowledge?
Oh, I love this question. So something I want to be quite clear about is that I do not share cultural specific knowledge. And I say that because I believe that cultural specific knowledge, particularly what it means to be Diné, should only be shared in community. It should be shared with other Diné relatives, other people who are related to me, those who I'm in close proximity to. and not just with anybody. I also believe that as Indigenous peoples, we deserve to be represented in ways that reflect our genuine and authentic experience. And that's something that I do appreciate about social media because it has sort of complicated what it means to be Indigenous in the 21st century. For so long, who we are has always been told by non Native people, and social media has given us the opportunities to represent indigeneity in a way that's nuanced, that's complex. I mean, I just think about all the some of my favorite indigenous influencers and content creators are out here showing ways in how they prepare well meat and how they're doing throat singing and how they do powwow. And then you have folks who are sharing certain recipes from their communities. There are folks who are sharing like what it means to be Native and the racism and the oppression that they experience. And you won't get that in contemporary media. It's something that's never been afforded to us. And even now, it's hard to even get something that is made for Native people on national media platforms. I mean, Molly of Denali, I think, is a really great example of how they're doing so much care and work for this character and how it's complicating and showing and introducing people to like what it means to be Native, or shows like Reservation Dogs or even Rutherford Falls. But even then, those aren't reaching the same numbers and metrics of influencers. I mean, we have Indigenous influencers with over 1 million followers whose videos get seen by the thousands. And that's something that I will always appreciate and acknowledge about social media. But at the same time, I also understand that if you are not being responsible, if you don't hold yourself accountable, you can also do a lot of damage too. And I've also seen that with certain Native influencers and content creators who get a little bit too cultural specific, and then we have people who are being irresponsible with the knowledge. I mean, like for example, I get like weirdly asked questions about like skinwalkers, and I'm like, that's great. I don't really talk about that unless you're in community with me. Or people will ask me about like, what does it mean to be Nagle? And I was like, I don't really talk about that unless you're within my community. But if you want to talk about my experience of being like queer and Indigenous trans femme, then we'll talk about that. Or if you want to talk about the sort of misrepresentation that people have and the misconceptions that people have about skinwalkers and contemporary media, then we'll talk about that. But at the end of the day, if you're not in community with me, if you're not Diné, I'm not going to share cultural specific knowledge with you because I've always been taught that you have to be careful with what you say and how you say it and who you share it with. Otherwise, could be some real harm done to not only yourself, but also to your community. And so being a Native influencer or content creator, there is a lot of responsibility and there is a lot of things that we have to really be aware of because our words both can be liberating, but also can hurt a lot of people as well.
So much responsibility. You carry a lot on your shoulders in terms of representing Indigenous peoples, Indigenous trans people, and then also of protecting your community. And you mentioned earlier that this work can be exhausting. How do you care for yourself? How are you taking care of yourself? I don't love the laugh. I want to hear
I'm
the care.
laughing because I think people are always surprised with my answer. I actually don't spend as much time on social media as people think or assume that I may do. It's so funny because people will like message me after I post a video. And the thing is though, like as soon as I post a video, I'm off. I'm offline, y'all. Like I try not to look at my notifications. I try not to look at the likes. I don't try to look at the comments. But then because of certain expectations of me when it comes to like brand deals and partnerships, I'm like, okay, let me look, let me respond, let me comment back. And so for me, it's always been about balance, always trying to both be present, both in person. So I do a lot of walking. I love my family, so we do a lot of board games. And we've also been playing a lot of video games as well, particularly like Marvel Rivals or Fortnite. And so it's really been about, I think for me, how I have cared for myself has been also putting boundaries. So like, which I think is like really hard for us to do as like Native people in general, is like learning to communicate our boundaries, learning to hold on to our boundaries. And that's something that I always recommend to people who, particularly starting out on social media, is like you have to have a boundary. You have to limit yourself because it can be quite an awful place on social media, especially as like a Native person, a queer person, or a trans person, or if you're like Black and brown. Like there are corners of the internet that I absolutely refuse to engage in, or even listen to or heard. And so the block button has become my friend. The mute button is also my friend. And also just like communicating with people about my boundaries and offline. Like, yeah, I'll get a message from my friend. They probably won't hear from me like a day or two later. And I'm over here like, hey, sorry about that. Thank you for being patient with me. How are you? Can we schedule a time to like chat? Whether it's like a video call or a phone call. So basically boundaries.
Boundaries are good. Boundaries is what I heard too.
We love boundaries.
Yeah, but it's also removal, right? You said like you post and you move off. And when you're, like you said, when your friend messages you, you're like, well, let's actually connect versus messaging back to just message back, having a conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
That's
yes.
beautiful.
Intentionality.
Yeah. So we sort of talked about social media here, and relevant to that is the differences maybe in academic world. So you decided to step away from academia. What possibilities do you see outside of academic institutions for doing meaningful liberatory work? And if you were ever to return to academic space, what would it need to look and feel like to truly support Indigenous and trans scholars?
So being outside of academia, because it's been a year since I finished my PhD, and I also recently declined to do a postdoc at NYU with the amazing Dr. Eve Tuck, because I realized that I needed to be in community, especially given our socio-political circumstances. Like, I didn't feel like I would have been, I mean, this is such an odd thing to say, considering it's New York, but I didn't feel like I would be safe and supported in New York versus being back home. Because something I've noticed is that my visibility as like a queer and trans person in my community has such a significant impact. Like I talked about this in another video about how much I enjoy actually going to the post office. And the people at the post office just like absolutely adore me. We're always checking in with each other. And I'm bringing this up because the possibilities of doing meaningful liberatory work means that, particularly as Indigenous people, it's really taking a further step with what community means. Like, I think we often forget that these institutions of higher education remove us from our community. And the work that we do is not for community, it's for them. They are materially benefiting from our research and scholarship. And although I think there are ways that we can be very strategic, that just seems very exhausting. And I honestly have to give props to the both of you, because I know that like fighting, and almost to every native scholar, and props to every Native scholar out there who is doing the work that they can, because like I don't know how y'all do it. It seems like every single day is a fight or a battle just to get the recognition that the work that you're doing, to get the scholarship and research funded. And I didn't think I have that in me, because I am so burnt out. I am so exhausted from being in academia. Like when I left my home, when I left my little town in 2013 to start my bachelor's, I went straight into a master's. in 2017. And then from that master's, I went straight into a PhD at 2019. And then now I moved back in 2023 back home. That's 10 years. 10 years I've been away from my community. And so being back, I've had to really figure out what is my role in a community that has moved on, but also what is my role given that I know a little bit too much about everything. And something that I really enjoyed is actually communicating theory in very accessible ways, giving my community the knowledge of how we can really achieve liberation theoretically, but also giving them the tools and practical experience of how we can navigate. Like I've been telling people like this, like for example, right now I'm substitute teaching at the local school district. And the other day someone was like, the nurse's office is available to us. I was like, yeah, just about. I mean, if you're on your parents' insurance, yes, it does. And they're like, what do you mean? So I had to explain what insurance is and benefits are to like these high school students. And also I tied it I was like, yeah, but then if your parents are also under Medicaid, which most Native people are because like insurance is just not affordable, then we also need to talk about the impact of the politics of what's happening. So you need to take advantage of having health insurance right now because given the attack that's currently happening across affordable healthcare. And so in a way, I'm talking to this 16-year-old, connecting both a simple question about insurance and the nurse's office to the politics. And I don't think people realize that our Native youth need to start having these conversations. And so we need to be more intentional with how we share our knowledge. And I really do think being generous with the knowledge that we gain from academia, sharing the theories, sharing the research, sharing the scholarship in ways that are accessible, that are relevant to our youth and to our community, that is liberatory work because then we're taking things from the institution and giving it back to our community with no strings attached. Whereas we all know that there are strings attached to the work that we're doing when we work with academic institutions. And I think your second question, what would it need to look and feel like to truly support Indigenous and trans scholars? Honestly, we just need that funding. A friend and I literally just got rejected from a grant, and the work we were going to do was about, I think it was community healthcare experiences for Two-Spirit and LGBTQ plus folks. And we got rejected because there wasn't a budget attached. There was a budget attached. But then I'm I'm over here, I'm okay, that's a little bit dismal. And I feel like if we just redistributed our wealth, if institutions redistributed their wealth, both not only the wealth that they have in terms of material, but also the land that they have. Because most universities within the United States have land and access to different resources that they took from Native people. So if they gave that back, I feel like we would also do really great there. But also at the end of the day, we just need money to fund research and scholarship that gives us life, that brings us to life, and doesn't reduce us to citations and how much the university will benefit from this.
Yes, that our lives are so much more expansive than what it's reduced to at an institution.
Mm-hmm.
And that oftentimes the work we do at an institution, we're compensated for it, but the work requires that there's an expense, which is that expansiveness of our life, that it's kind of reduced down to what we put out into the world.
Mm-hmm.
And your decision to step away from NYU, a prestigious institution, and to return to community really resists the idea that Native scholars have to be this way. Really resists the notion that there is one path and one right way to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And that maybe it is more meaningful and rewarding to actually be and with community in ways that you haven't been allowed to be in the past 10 years?
Oh, absolutely. I'm healing my inner child.
Mm-hmm.
I left with a lot of anger and sadness, and being back, I'm just like, wow, I've accomplished so much. I've seen so much. And now I'm back. And sometimes I do feel stuck. I will admit that. Sometimes I do feel stuck, but then I remember of how much I've gone through. But also there's just so much more that I'm looking forward to explore. I mean, like, I'm 30. I have like a good 60, 70, 80 years maybe. And it was really time for me to focus on myself instead of what academia demanded of me.
Yes. Well, that's a great segue to our final question, which is about this notion that joy is an act of refusing settler colonialism. As we imagine Indigenous futures, what does a decolonized society look or feel like to you? What shifts would make that future more possible?
Okay. So you know that feeling. You know that sort of moment when the sun is rising. You're taking in a deep breath. It's probably a little bit cloudy, and you can smell the rain coming. And in that moment, the world is just a little bit quiet, but then you hear like a bird, or you hear like the wind rustling the leaves. But everything is still alive all around you. But also in that brief moment, you feel connected to every living thing that is around you. For me, that is what a decolonized society looks like, where you feel connected to all of creation, where you're able to just like breathe and feel calm. Like you can do anything and everything, but also still feel content at the same time. And I think the way that we can make that possible on a practical note is really shifting our relationships to each other, how we see and understand each other. And I think oftentimes, particularly in academia, we see people as opportunities and resources and not just people with lives, not just with people with experiences, not just as people who have loving and supportive families that they're taking care of. We don't see people as people, we see them as something we can benefit from. And in that way, we exploit people. And so I think for me, what I've been trying to do is like, how can I nurture relationships and friendships with people who love and support me and who celebrate everything? I mean, I think there's a quote of like, be friends with the people who will speak kind things about you when you're not in a room, something of that sort. But I really do think we need to change our relationship to people and how we see them. And although it seems monumental and almost impossible, I always think about how we're still here. Our ancestors experience dying worlds. They experience death and genocide, and yet somehow we have survived because they knew that being in community, sharing knowledge and experience of survival with community, with their young ones, was how we were going to thrive. So although their worlds have died, somehow their knowledge has survived. And I think that is something we really need to both appreciate, is that we were always taught to be, I know particularly as Diné, we were taught to be in harmony and in beauty with the world. And I always take that a step further because, okay, how exactly do I see that in my relationships? How can I continue to be in beauty and harmony with people I cherish and love, but also with strangers? Something that has been both surprising to me is, I don't know if y'all do this, but I've started giving people random compliments on the street. I'll be like, I love your earrings, or like, your outfit looks so amazing. And people are so surprised. They'll like stop for a moment and they'll say thank you. And they smile. And so I really do think that if we want to achieve my vision of what a decolonized society is in which we feel content, but also connected to all creation, we do need to shift how we nurture relationships with each other, how we nurture community with each other. And the thing is that we have that knowledge. It has survived centuries. And I do think that knowledge of community and connection will continue to be our salvation and liberation.
That was so perfect. Because as you were talking, I had this image of myself getting up in the morning before my son wakes up, when it's still dark out, but the sun's popping up, and I can sit and feel my breath fill up my belly, and time kind of stands still. And I think with what you're saying, what I hear is a decolonial future is not where we are simply surviving, but we're also not grinding in institutions that make us work excessively to determine our worth. So I hear that relationships with other people matter, but also that starts with our relationship with ourselves and the time we take to nurture that. And that once we can nurture ourselves, we can nurture other people. And I'm really grateful for you sharing that piece, that end piece. That was really lovely.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful world. I'll live there with you.
We start today.
Yes.
We write it down.
Write it down.
Because love is abundance. And I think we often forget that. I know I forget that. I know that I forget that. And I feel like in that moment, when we take that first breath, maybe it's just me, but I feel like it's like a little hug from the universe. That like, even though we may not have a lot of love for ourselves, the world still does for us.
Yeah. That's where I lean when I'm like really having a hard time. I lean in that support of our spirits, our spirit helpers, our money duke, that our elders talk so beautifully that they love us unconditionally.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be a certain way. You don't have to produce a certain amount of things. You don't have to, you just be, and they love us all the same, right?
Mm-hmm.
We were created from them, of course.
I agree.
Beautiful.
Thank you so much, Charlie. Yeah, it was so lovely to connect with you today and to have you share with us.
She brought the storms.
And thank you for the invitation again. I just love moments like this where we can just like chat and talk and nurture community with one another. So thank you for that.
Oh, miigwech.
Take care. Nyawa.
Be safe, everyone.
You have been listening to Tending Our Roots with Indigenous Methodologies. We are your hosts, Jill Fish, Tuscarora Nation.
And Miguel Gonzalez, Lakudere Ojibwe. This podcast was funded by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and supported by the Circle P50 Center of Excellence, funded through the National Institute on Drug Abuse of the National Institutes of Health. The content is solely the responsibility of the hosts and their guests and does not necessarily represent the official views of their funders.
Production of this season was made possible by solar-powered studios in what is now known as St. Paul, Minnesota, on Dakota Homelands. Podcast artwork was completed by Marlena Miles, a Spirit Lake, Dakota, Mohegan, and Muskogee artist. Our theme song, Best of Me, is used with the permission of Anishinaabe and First Nations singer-songwriter Leonard Sumner. You can find more detailed information in our show notes.
Miigwech for listening.
Nyawa.
If you'd seen the dark that I've seen and the struggle, you wouldn't walk another mile on your own.